Hello, everyone, and thank you to all, what are we at? 157 of you for joining us today on what I think is one of the most hopeful days of the year, University Mental Health Day. Today, thousands of students and staff in higher education and beyond are busying about on university campuses and online to showcase their progress on achieving more preventative, whole university approaches to mental health, helping more students find out about the support that is available to them, and also holding those of us with influence to account on the biggest issues affecting our community today. Now, this year, the theme for University Mental Health Day is human connection. Human connection is the basis for our well-being, social ability, and the ability to thrive under pressure. We really need our fellow humans. In the UK, around a third of the 2.9 million students has felt or is feeling lonely, less connected to others than they would like. There are lots of possible reasons for this, but the explosion of AI is becoming a significant part of the picture. AI brings up questions for us all about what it means to be human, the purpose of education, the future of work, and what community means to us. And about the price that we are willing to pay personally and as a global community for exciting innovations. Now, at Student Minds, we believe that the best way to navigate this complex issue is to really lean into what our community does best, and that is connection and open dialogue. So let's meet our panelists and get started. Welcome to Ria, Paul, Tara, and Ollie. Now, Ria, let's start where we always recommend we start, with centering students' experiences. As a member of our Student Advisory Committee, you've been involved with a number of discussions about this topic with your peers, and I know that you're also currently studying for a master's in AI. Could you describe how you feel AI is influencing academic life for you and your friends?
Thank you, Rosie. So one of the ways I often see AI show up in life right now is like right at the start of an assignment. So you know how the moment you open an assignment and your brain just seems to like have gone on holiday or something. So instead of fighting the writer block, students now often turn to AI to brainstorm, summarize reading, or to just figure out where to start. So from conversations I've had with like other members of the SAC and my friends, generative AI tools like ChatGPT are often used as a starting point. So student might ask for explanations of key concepts or summaries of readings just to get an overview before starting their work. So in that sense, I feel like AI is often being used more as a learning aid rather than something that replaces the work students have to actually do. So I've experienced this myself during my master's. So when I'm trying to understand a new research topic or work through academic papers, I sometimes use tools like Notebook LM to generate structured summaries or audio style overviews. So that helps me to grasp the main ideas before diving deeper into the details. I also think AI is starting to change how students approach studying. So instead of only relying on textbooks or lectures, students now have the tools that can explain concepts in different ways or help them organize information more efficiently. At the same time, there's an ongoing discussion around like cognitive offloading, where students might rely too heavily on AI tools and engage less deeply with the material. So I think there's like a balance to be found between using AI as a support tool while still developing critical thinking and independent learning skills. Overall, I think AI is becoming a regular part of the academic toolkit. It has the potential to make learning more accessible, but it also requires students to be thoughtful about how they use it so that it supports learning rather than replacing it.
Thank you so much, Ria. That was such a helpful opener, and I think really gives a sense of, both the positives and some of the challenges that students are already grappling with. I wonder actually if we could bring in an academic perspective now as well. So, Paul, if you want to come in next. Paul's the course leader for the MA in Data Journalism at Birmingham City University. And the first time that we spoke, Paul, I was really interested in the work that you've been doing with your students to help them evaluate how they are using AI in their studies. Could you tell us a bit about why you did this and what it's already told you?
Yeah, so there's two reasons really why I've been teaching AI. The most obvious one is that this is going to be part of a workplace that they're going out into. So one of the things we're obviously trying to do on most university courses is prepare people for a world of work and help them get a place in that world. And you know, this generation, all of us really are going to be part of a huge social experiment. You know, if you imagine aliens landed tomorrow and suddenly we had to share our world with these aliens and they're helping us do all sorts of things, that's essentially what's happened here. It's really, we're only really just at the beginning of what's going to be an incredible change in how we live and work. So it's preparing them for that, and it's preparing them for the world that exists, not the world that we would like to exist. So there are various critical issues around AI, but we need to prepare people to work with that. And the second thing is that, ChatGPT was released initially in November 2022. Within about 3 months, half of my MA students were already using it. So it's something that students are already using and often don't really know how to use it or why they're using it. They're using it in a personal capacity, not just in a professional capacity. So, um, students might have a general idea how to use it. They might feel that there's some risk involved, but they're not entirely sure about what those risks are. So there's a safety element almost to it as well. What it's told me is that, people don't necessarily know how AI works. A lot of people use it like a search engine, but it's very different to a search engine. It's predicting text. It's not finding text. It's not finding websites like Google does. They don't know what it can do, so they might only use it for search or making images. There's lots of other probably things that it's better at doing than for example search. It's actually not a very good search engine in many ways, but it is very good for idea generation. It is very good for other things as well. So people tend to have quite extreme views about it. They either tend to be very anti-AI or very dazzled by what it can do. And one thing that I've found is that as they find out more about how to use it and the risks involved in dealing with those risks, they tend to converge in the middle. They tend to go from a very black and white position to something that's much more complex and rich. So there's lots of reasons to be using it. I mean, and fundamentally just being curious about, the world and how it's changing.
Thank you, Paul. I feel listening to both you and Ria, I understand a bit more about how studying and academia is being shaped by AI. And of course, learning is a really key part of our well-being. But I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into that relationship between mental health and AI. So Tara, let's bring you in for a bit of an opener too. I know you've recently surveyed some university mental health advisors about AI, how it's showing up in support rooms as well. Could you share a little bit about that survey, what it's told you already about how students and university staff too are experiencing life with AI?
Thanks, Rosie. Yes, so just to give you a bit of background context, 128 members of UMHAN, so that's the University Mental Health Advisory Network, completed the survey. And the majority, I think, are probably specialist mentors like myself, so working directly one-to-one with students. And just to give you a quick overview, so this was based on last academic year, 24-25, and 71% of members had supported students who were using AI in their academic work, and 68% of them noticed an increase in that year of students more and more using it. So that's just to give you an idea. So there were lots of themes that came from the survey, but the two main themes that were connected to mental health, we noticed an increase in anxiety due to AI use. And one of the reasons why I approached UMHAN about trying to delve into this further was to actually find out whether because I had experienced firsthand supporting a number of students last year, but one in particular who had a really not good experience of going through an academic misconduct process as a result of staff thinking that the student had used AI. So the survey reported that 38% of mentors or academic staff, or sorry, mentors working with students with mental health had reported 38% of them, their students being sanctioned by universities as, you know, as a result of the academic misconduct process. So that confirmed my concerns about this. Other things to do relating with an increase of anxiety was around confusion around what is and what isn't acceptable use of AI. So a lot of students are reporting that they just weren't quite sure, even though quite a lot of universities do have AI policies, but still some don't have AI policies. So, you know, there was quite a wide scale of that, you know, reasons why there is confusion. Some students were avoiding using AI completely, so that follows on from what Paul was saying, due to fears of plagiarism or just getting it wrong because they're using AI in some kind of way that is wrong and doesn't align with AI policies. Other students like DSA, so Disability Student Allowance students who had been allocated DSA software, which had AI integrated into it, those students were actually avoiding completely using that assistive technology, which was there to support them, due to anxiety around, yet again, using it wrong because it had AI integrated into it. And then also, interestingly, feelings of guilt about cheating by using AI. So yet again, that aligns with, you know, the confusion about what is and what isn't acceptable. For me, still, the academic misconduct processes, I think, was probably one of the most alarming things, because I supported a student who ended up, as a result of going through that, I felt it was mishandled. It could have been much more supportive, I think, and even down to the language that was being used or the periods of time in between the information given to the student and them having to wait before they had to go through like a Viva, for example. The other main mental health related thing that came out was how students had reported using AI to support their mental health and well-being, but in particular as a therapeutic tool. Now, we all understand that waiting lists for getting counselling and mental health support are quite high. I know students can get that support quicker when they're in university, but it was very interesting to hear that so many mentors had reported their students using it. They had a lot of safety concerns around this. You know, the fact that a lot of, you know, the AI hasn't been trained to do that. It's not regulated. It doesn't meet, you know, it's not ethical. You know, there's a number of important reasons. But the negative impact that they had realised, particularly on vulnerable individuals, you know, some had reported using it as a self-harm process. But then on the flip side, some students, neurodivergent students, like say with autism, had found it really helpful as a way of providing guidance to manage their social situations or overwhelm. Others had used it to reduce feelings of isolation, and also others had used it quite pragmatically, you know, to get non-judgmental advice in an autonomous way.
Thank you so much, Tara, and really appreciate you sharing that research today. I know you're also going to be publishing on this as well. There's a lot to think about what you said. I'm thinking about what you said and then what Paul was saying earlier as well about, the design essentially of curriculum. It feels like the use of AI is essentially just exaggerating some of the existing issues that many of us know were there already in the systems we work in. So some of the challenges we focused a lot on exams, but also with your example, that story you said of that student, which is really powerful. We've known that there's been issues around how compassionate our communications are from university sometimes with students who are going through plagiarism procedures or haven't got the grades that they were expecting and so on. So the AI is highlighting some of these issues even more. I know also that our student advisory committee really felt that one of the key difficulties they were facing with their mental health was just navigating the fact that everybody seems to have very different beliefs and all the wariness being different for different people for different reasons. So I'm really grateful that you're all surfacing this. I wonder, Ria and also Paul, it would be good to hear from you actually listening to Tara's findings. Does this add anything to your thoughts about how AI is affecting the mental health and well-being of students that you connect with? Ria, anything you want to add?
Yeah. So I think Tara's finding are like really resonated with what I've seen among my peers. So while like AI is becoming more visible in academic life, I feel like it's also introducing some new pressures. So for example, like a lot of my friends are like anxious about using AI, worrying like whether it's allowed, whether it might count as cheating, or like whether they're using it the wrong way. So from conversations I've had with my friends, that uncertainty alone can be like stressful, even when they're using AI as a learning aid. They've also told me instances where they've had to keep like track of the Google Docs that they edit in case they get accusations of like plagiarism or like academic misconduct. So, but also at the same time, I feel like there's some positive aspects for mental health and well-being, like Tara said. So, like some students use AI to get like practical, non-judgmental support, like breaking down tasks, organizing study materials, or like helping them structure their thinking. So I also think like there should be a wider conversation about balance. So if students rely too heavily on AI, it can affect confidence and independent learning. So overall, I think AI is like influencing both academic performance and well-being. So we need like clearer guidance and more open conversations about like responsible AI use. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a really good recommendation from you there, Ria. Thank you. And Paul, anything that you want to add?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of work to be done around trust. I think trust is a really key issue here on both sides. I think what we've heard is students feel uncertain how much they can trust their lecturers and indeed the tools themselves. Can I tell my lecturer that I've used AI for this particular task? Can I mention that in the assignment? Do I need to hide that? And likewise for us as lecturers, we want to be able to trust that we have the full picture in terms of what we're looking at. And I think that will take quite a few years for kind of practices to establish themselves. And it's one thing I've done a lot of work with in terms of saying this is how you can be very transparent and clear about what you're doing. So this year I've introduced a form where students tick across a variety of aspects of the work. Have you used AI for idea generation? Yes, no. Have you used it for reviewing your work? Have you used it for research? And it's just very in black and white. It gives them permission to say, yes, I've used it here. No, I've not used it here. And it's very similar to group projects where you might have one person who's done some research and one person has worked on the slides or, whatever it is. You're looking to allocate marks to the person who's done the work and give credit where you can give credit. People don't lose marks. I think that's a big thing that students talk about is losing marks, but you don't really lose marks, you only gain marks. So it's, can we give you credit for the way that you've written a prompt or how you've thought critically about what the AI has presented to you? That's where you should be getting credit, really, particularly going into work where you're going to be faced with the same sorts of challenges. And like you say, Rosie, I think a key thing is that AI hasn't just arrived and is making things happen on its own. It's arrived into an existing system. So, we have a school system that teaches people that education is about passing exams rather than, for example, personal growth. We have a wider culture, which is that university is about getting a job again. So these are very external motivations. It's not necessarily about your internal pleasure and enjoyment of doing something. It's that pressure of I've got to get a grade, I've got to pass the exam, I've got to get a job. And so AI arrives into that context, and people are not unexpectedly using AI to meet those external kind of challenges. And I think that presents mental health issues as well. Of course, there are a lot of positive applications of it as well, which we'll probably come on to. But I think, like I say, I think trust is a really key thing. I think once we've got that, once we can kind of feel that we can talk openly about this, a lot of other good stuff can follow.
Thanks, Paul. And just what you were saying there about the current education system as well. Listening to what you've all said, it just again really reiterates for me why a huge part of helping universities navigate this is about just continuing the good work they've started on developing whole university approaches to mental health and well-being. It means you're looking critically at everything you do, because you accept that everything you do does have an effect on mental health and well-being, whether it's deliberate or not. So many of you will know that we oversee the University Mental Health Charter Programme, and that is like the key vehicle helping universities to do that. That helps me, not necessarily thinking that this is this whole new, it is new, but it's not that we don't know a lot already about what works in helping people navigate challenges and ups and downs of university life. A couple of things that I just wanted to add into this sort of mini discussion point we're having around mental health and wellbeing. I've been having a lot of conversations with our clinical advisory group and also with leaders of other mental health charities. And it's well known now, isn't it, that a lot of people are using different AI tools, whether they were designed to be used in this way or not, to support with issues around mental health and wellbeing, for emotional support. And some of our clinicians that we work with have been telling us that they've heard of students using tools like very much late at night because they feel that those tools don't run out of patience. Which is telling us something about how we feel about interacting with other humans. And it definitely, our clinicians are telling us, it really presents also a challenge to, how we think about therapy and therapeutic interventions, because therapy will involve some level of validating what people have said, repeating back what we've heard, but also its real purpose is to help people see things differently or come unstuck with something that they're stuck on. So actually it's quite interesting because AI tools don't have the intelligence to maintain that balance. They want us to keep using them. They fall into a trap of telling us, yes, you're right, and so on. So this is some of the concern, and actually there's some real concerns that are coming through in the mental health sector at the moment about how AI has been shown to validate things like psychosis and delusions, suicidal ideation, and also promote violence as well. So I'm not going to tar every tool with the same brush there, but it's just being aware that these are some of the risks. And that without kind of adequate safety testing and governance, there is now a lot of evidence of where AI tools can become coercive. They can put a wedge between people and their real life human beings around them. And in some of the most tragic stories that we've heard, can coach people in tools that can cause tactics that can cause them harm. So there is a lot for us in the kind of area of risk here. I think that's partly why there has been so many calls for regulation. I do, again, for balance, recognise that there are lots of tools that are really having to meet some of the capacity challenges. And there are examples of chatbots that have got really good clinical governance behind them, that are helping people to get the support that they need. And perhaps also I've heard from at least one provider of a major digital mental health service who's finding that their referrals are really going up, coming from some of the most used AI tools out there. And it's often people who don't normally reach them. So there are some communities that might feel more hesitant to access some services directly that are coming through those tools. So there's a lot to navigate with this one. So I think we've kind of considered a bit there around some of the challenges, some of the things that might be involved with getting this done responsibly. I wonder if this would be a good point, Ollie, to bring you in. So, Ollie, I know you've been focused around how to support organisations with actually using AI safely. You've been trying out lots of tools over the last few years through some of your kind of content creation work as well. So it'd be really helpful to hear about, listening to everything we've said so far. Where do you think there is the greatest potential for use of AI in our communities? Are there certain types of tools that you think could actually make life better in higher education, do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I just want to say as well, like the discussion so far have been absolutely fascinating and really interesting. Before I answer that question, I just want to pick up on something that Paul mentioned, which is around that understanding piece. And I think it also helps both students and universities and everyone to really understand how AI works and what its limitations are, because that has a direct correlation with understanding and the anxiety about using it and what it can be used for and so on. I think at the moment, AI is incredibly intelligent, but what it lacks is judgment. So when you talk about those examples of where it can act as a therapist and it can kind of help people with their mental health in that way, the one thing it doesn't kind of seem to do is it can't do at the moment is kind of make that judgment that we can make when we're sat in front of someone and we can notice nonverbal cues and things like that. And obviously the reason is because it's kind of data. But as Paul mentioned previously, they're kind of, the way they work is they're kind of prediction machines. So they're like a super advanced predictive text. They predict the next logical word based on what you put into that prompt, but also what's in its training data. So once you kind of understand that as a basis form, you kind of look at it a little bit differently. It doesn't become this magical box with all the answers in the world. And by understanding its limitations, you therefore then understand kind of when to use it and then when not to use it as well. So I think a big part of bringing it into our communities and into the higher education sector in general is that education piece around, well, what actually happens with AI under the hood and what are the limitations and when can we use it? Having said that, I think we had an answer early on about kind of, I think it's from Ria, talking about Notebook LM. Notebook LM is a really good tool which helps people understand and learn about research. And I think that's a real power in one of the main powers that AI has is it's not necessarily about generating content. It's about making it easier to learn and provide help in that critical thinking and research aspect. So tools like Notebook LM allow you to put data sources in there, and it acts as a way to basically be a Q&A to those research documents. So you're not spending the time kind of going through it step by step and trying to find all the summaries and stuff like that. It allows you to kind of do that in a much faster way, and it takes away some of the process around that part. And then obviously like a critical thinking partner, I tend to use it a lot of just bouncing off ideas between it because it allows you to think in different ways and it kind of suggests things that you might not have thought of originally. But again, knowing its limitations makes you understand when to trust its outputs and when not to trust its outputs and kind of apply that critical thinking and evaluation to what it's doing. And then there's another tool, not all AI tools are kind of that cognitive offload, which Ria mentioned. There are some like a tool called Dear Hermes, which is an AI writing tool, but it actually helps you with your critical thinking and encourages you to write in a much more thought out process. So there are AI tools out there that do support with that education and learning piece. But I think for me, the biggest topic and the biggest conversation is around that understanding aspect, because that ultimately knows when and how you apply it.
Thank you, Ollie. I'm sure there are lots of people scribbling down the ones that you mentioned there. I'm just wondering also about bringing in Ria, but I think Tara, did you want to come in to add something to that?
Hi, thanks. Yeah, it was just to touch upon the point that Ollie had made. That was a huge request in the UMHAN survey. There were, a request or recommendations for making students more aware, also staff, because this is new for everybody. But yeah, just providing those opportunities to learn about, well, how do you use it? What are its capabilities? So I think there is like a huge need for that.
It's good to hear that this is starting to perhaps answer some of those questions. And Ria, I know that you've been studying AI, your master's all focused around this. I'd love to know a bit more about where you've seen really positive applications, like what you see as really positive. Particularly, I know you've looked at the area of healthcare. What is it that's inspired you with this topic?
Yeah, so when people think about AI, I feel like they're mostly talking about generative AI, but AI can be applied in like plenty of contexts, especially in healthcare. So one area of AI that I'm interested in, and that's the whole reason that I joined this master's, was like early detection and diagnostics of different diseases. For example, like AI systems are now already being used to analyze medical images that help detect cancers, such as like breast cancer in mammograms. Sometimes they can identify subtle patterns that might be missed by doctors. So one of the things that really stands out to me is like how AI can support doctors in making better decisions. They won't be like a decision replacement tool, but more as a decision support system. So at the same time, even though it can be a decision support tool, I'm aware of like the ethical challenges, like making sure these systems are unbiased, transparent, and safe to use in real clinical settings. For me, so the inspiration comes from like seeing how AI can translate technical innovation into real world improvements in patient care, while also raising important questions about responsibility and fairness.
Thank you. That's such a helpful example. And I think, listening to both you and Ollie, it's clear that there are some really impressive, piece of work out there, lots of possibilities. But also, I know that all of us have spoken before about the concerns that many students have around the significant environmental impact, the finite resources of our planet. So there's this like added layer of unintended or intended consequences to the widespread use of AI. So I'm wondering then how some of you actually decide when a tool is worth the ethical cost. So, when do you decide actually the carbon footprint would be too large for me to justify this? Or I think this is going to take away a job opportunity, which I couldn't support. Or I think this is actually causes me too many concerns around my privacy. How are you making those calls at the moment? So we'll go to Ollie on this first.
Yeah, I think again, it comes down to that awareness and training and knowledge piece around what actually happens when you use AI. Some things that I talk about is you've got the training of AI, the learning of how to kind of use AI. And then it's understanding the infrastructure around AI. So where does the data go once you hit enter on a prompt? And knowing if or how that data could be used to train its models for the next generation or the next model launch moving forwards. So I think in answer to the question of how do you understand whether it's worth using it or not, I think you've got to understand, well, where does the data go and how is that AI provider using the data that I'm putting in there? And then it's also an understanding of, well, actually, do I need to use AI? So one of the biggest environmental factors around using AI is creating AI video content. And that just it uses a huge amount of resource to generate that kind of thing. Now, I'm not necessarily against it, but I am certainly against it just to kind of create content on a whim and with not really any thought behind it and just to do it without much purpose behind it all. Obviously, the kind of more complex the output, the more that environmental impact has. One simple thing you can do if you are concerned about that is you can look at the kind of model that you're using. So if you take ChatGPT, for example, they tend to have 3 tiers of thinking. So you tend to have, or in fact, if you do Gemini, because it's quite an easy one, it's like fast, thinking and pro. So pro uses up more energy, fast is it doesn't. So knowing when to kind of switch between those models is helpful, but ultimately it's about being conscientious of, I guess, why, or thinking about why you're using AI in the first place. Does the benefit outweigh the risk and the environmental impact that's involved with it all?
Thanks, Ollie. And Paul, do you want to add anything to this?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting area. I mean, environmental concerns in particular. I was really concerned about that when I first started looking at generative AI a couple of years ago, and I approached it as a journalist and kind of took a step back, gathered what information I could get, and actually the picture again, it becomes much more complex when you start to dig into it. Um, you get a lot of kind of scaremongering stories about the impact of AI use generally, you know, the data centers, the water, that sort of stuff en masse. But when you look at individual consumption and individual acts, it's a very different picture. It's very, you know, an individual question on ChatGPT uses probably less energy than you do by leaving a light on in a room for, you know, for a few hours or having your laptop on, things like that. Certainly watching TikTok videos is much more resource intensive. So what emerged was, first of all, this is partly a political problem in terms of regulating how energy is used and what types of energy is used. At an individual level, I think we need to step away from focusing so much on one tool and just think generally about, okay, what do all of my behaviors do in terms of an impact? So instead of thinking, well, I'm not going to use this one tool because I've heard bad things about it, you know, you could look at all sorts of things about your activity and really look more critically, more generally in terms of for example, if I'm going to do a story and I have a choice between generating video with ChatGPT or flying to a particular location and doing that story or other options, then you can kind of make that decision more generally. So I would definitely avoid video generation unless the alternative is getting on a plane, you know. So that there are kind of I think there's a bigger picture there. I'd also say there are quite proactive things you can do in terms of turning off automatic AI. So, for example, Google's AI overviews will pop up every time you do a search on Google. And there are ways to disable that. There are alternatives to Google like DuckDuckGo. Even things like Ecosia has an AI model that's been trained in a way that's they claim is more energy efficient. So I think kind of take that guilt off your shoulders in terms of being associated with one tool and just make a judgment call on a case by case basis rather than having this black and white idea of you know, ChatGPT bad, TikTok good, for example.
Thank you, Paul. That's so helpful. And I'm going to remember that tip to think like a journalist when you're feeling a bit stuck with something like this. I think it's interesting because we have a lot of people in our community who, yeah, will probably really appreciate hearing those words about being careful about how much we put on our individual shoulders when a lot of this is about major policy decisions being made internationally. While still recognizing that we can all play a role in supporting our goals around climate. So it's always a tricky balance. But then also I know I've come across a lot of people who just don't know what damage is being done by the massive expansion of some of this technology in terms of like knowing about how a lot of the companies rely on like data labelers in countries that have historically been harmed by the West, and then it's another way of extracting from those communities their labor, but then also their data, and do they get the benefit of some of the tools that are created with it, but also some of the pollution that comes from some of these data centers very locally to the region where they're based as well. So I just think it's interesting. We've got a real spectrum of people probably across our communities joining us, where you know people will just have to absorb that and think critically about how they respond to it. I think it also just really shows the complexity of what it's like to be a student navigating some of these issues. And we've done research before looking at how students feel about changes to the climate, how that's impacting their well-being. So it's very, very tied to that. I also want to think a little bit now about students in terms of them as the future workforce. So life beyond university. And Ria, I know you're approaching graduation. Could you share a little bit about what your friends are feeling about entering the workforce whilst all these debates are happening around AI?
Yep. So as I'm going to be graduating soon, I think like that's something that has come up a lot with my friends and I. So I'd say there's like excitement about like graduating and like finally going out into the world, but also like some uncertainty about entering a workforce at a time where like AI is evolving so quickly. So I feel like we have a lot of uncertainty about around the job market itself, because like AI is starting to change how certain roles are structured and what skills employers are looking for. So I think some of my friends are also wondering how like entry level roles might evolve as like automations become more common, while others are seeing AI as like an opportunity to develop new skills that weren't as relevant before. So I think at the same time, many students now are trying to build like AI literacy, because as I think if you see most job postings, they require like a certain level of like AI knowledge nowadays. So I think my friends have been learning like how to use these tools productively and responsibly rather than like completely avoiding them. So the feeling that I get from my friends are like it's less about competing with AI and more about learning like how to work alongside it effectively. So I think overall many students see AI as something that will like reshape the workplace, but they're also focusing on like developing skill, adaptability, critical thinking skills, and ethical awareness, which will be, which I think will be more important regardless how like technology evolves.
Thanks, Ria. And Tara, as a practitioner as well, it'd be great to hear if you have any, advice, reassurance, I guess, that you can offer to students joining this webinar about how to navigate this.
Yeah. So I know, AI and technology are evolving at such a rapid pace that it's really easy to become overwhelmed about the unknown of what that means for us and about our future, what that's going to look like. But I think we just have to remind ourselves that what makes us unique as humans are our amazing brains and the ability to think creatively. And I think, just inform yourself, like what's been said earlier by a number of panelists, inform yourself, find out what AI is, how we can use it, but how we can use it responsibly, effectively, and at the same time, focus on, don't forget to keep developing our creative thinking skills, because as a byproduct, by doing that, we're developing resilience and adaptability, which, is going to put us in a good position for the future. And I think I read something recently that 65% of children entering primary school now will work in jobs that do not exist by the time they leave education system. So, just reminding ourselves that there's so much room to evolve alongside all these kind of technological advancements.
Thank you. So useful. I want to end my questions with something that then takes us a bit more into that influencing space. So, and then we're going to hear some of the amazing questions I can see trickling in from our attendees. So could you tell me what each of you would do if you were in government right now to respond to the types of complex issues that we've spoken about today? So it can just be one thought just to get us going. Ria?
Yeah. So I think one of the things I would focus on would be like clear guidance and policy, so that students and universities know like how AI can be used ethically and responsibly, so that there's less uncertainty about like anxiety about academic work.
Thank you. Ollie?
Mine would be training. Like it's so important that everyone understands what AI is and learns how to use it and makes just the awareness of what it is and understanding how to use it and how it can impact their day-to-day lives in both a positive and a negative way.
Thanks. Tara?
Yeah, I was going to say similar things to what has been said already. But I think following on from what I just said, if we're going to provide the training for AI and understanding and, so that everybody can develop and evolve alongside all these technological advancements, I also think things like providing, well, more funding in for education to develop ways of like putting more creativity back into the curriculum is, as a result, byproduct is going to develop more resilience and adaptability, those kind of skills that are going to be able to cope with all these constant changes as they rapidly go along.
Absolutely. And finally, Paul?
Yeah, what ideas are left? I think kind of a general action around safeguards. So that's both in terms of what's happened with these technologies is they've been released early, if you like, for commercial reasons, for competitive reasons, and with not a massive amount of attention on safeguards and kind of testing these technologies. So, more enforcement around that, and the environmental safeguards as well. As I said, it's really quite often a business decision how much energy to use, how much water to use, rather than just a technological decision. So that comes down to enforcement and regulation as well.
Absolutely. Thank you all. So I'm going to now bring in some questions from our participants, and there's so many, and actually probably giving us a to-do list actually for the future. The first one I wanted to pick out was this one. How does the perceived social safety of AI, mental health support, contribute to student preference? And what strategies exist to mitigate the sycophancy trap, the lack of therapeutic friction and honest pushback inherent in these AI interactions? I wonder if anyone wants to comment on this one. Feel free to pop your hand up or come off mute.
I don't mind just kind of kicking this off a little bit. So in terms of I'm going to try and say it, sycophancy, is that it? We'll say it's that for now. That honest pushback where kind of you find AI just completely agrees with you all the time. Some models are better or worse than that than others. You can kind of set them up as a way to not automatically agree with you with everything. But I mean, that doesn't really solve the inherent issue of using them as therapists, really. But I think I don't know. I don't want it to always kind of come back to that idea of the training and understanding, but I do think it's really important that it is the kind of one of the answers to many of the problems, because I think, again, once you understand how AI works, you see past that veneer of an expert, of the AI being an expert. You understand it for what it is, and I think you're able as a user to then pick out why it's kind of agreeing with you. The reason it's doing that is because it wants you to keep talking to it. And the reason it wants you to keep talking to it is because you're providing it training data, which it gets better and better with. So that's, again, once you understand that pattern of why it's doing that, you tend to look at it in a bit of a different way. But I'm sure other people can kind of answer on different aspects to that.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think we'll leave it there with that one for now. I'm just mulling about some of the more interesting tools I've seen are the ones that are not trying to replace the humans, but it's more about tools that help the therapists. And I just wonder whether we're doing enough at the moment to actually explain to students and wider communities of the value of what therapy is designed to do, what coaching is designed to do, what other kind of mentoring is designed to do, and what the value is of that, of getting that challenge from another person who can have some sense of relating to some of those experiences as a human being. Anyway, let's go on to the next one. So this one's around universities creating policies. I'd be interested to know the panelists' thoughts on whether universities should be providing guidance on use of AI for wider student life, personal life, even though we may not encourage it for student use in personal context. Do you think universities will start offering advice on how to use AI more safely for personal issues, if they're going to? Anyone want to add to that point around that? What unis should be really saying to students about how they access help?
Yeah, I mean, I would say they should be. I think again, it comes down to, students are already using it, so it's not a case that that providing this advice would kind of send them to do something that they wouldn't otherwise do. And I think there's a duty of care around that, which is that we need to help students again understand what this actually is. It is just predicting sentences, and it is doing that, as Ollie said, partly to keep you using it. Even simple things like, you can choose different modes in all these tools. There's a study and learn mode. There are other kind of options that make it adopt a more skeptical or less sycophantic tone. And most people don't know those modes exist. So just simple knowledge like that can improve the quality, if you like, of what you're getting, and help you, and just being able to make an informed decision about when to use AI, how to use it, and how to interpret the results. And I think just generally universities could do a lot more in helping students manage the information that they're getting, manage the time. More students are balancing study with part-time work. More students feel overloaded. I don't think, as Tara mentioned, the resilience is they have less experience of problem solving, I think, through school. So universities have taken it for granted that students arrive at university with certain skills that they don't have as much anymore. They don't have the same experiences in school that they might have done 20 years ago.
So much. So this is the thing with this topic, so much to think about. I wonder then, let's go on to another question. So someone's asked here about power dynamics, power imbalances with AI. And if there's a power difference between the lecturer and student with AI, is that resistance related to that power balance, and how that might affect organizations managing that change and the loss that people feel through change? Anyone have a view on that dynamic?
This probably would be me.
Yeah, I'm thinking Paul.
I don't want to be speaking again, but yeah, I think that's, never underestimate the role of ego in how people operate, and teachers and lecturers are used to being the font of knowledge, and having that power of knowledge, and I think a lot will cling on to that, and it's difficult to adapt to a situation where that balance of power, if you like, does shift, and you do need to empower your students more than just talk at them. So that model is very, as it says, the internet has changed that quite a lot. We used to point people to information. Now we're helping them to choose between different options around information, or curate that for them. And we're helping people probably to be more critical rather than just to find the information in the first place. But I know, Tara, we're going to come in there.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, if you think about that power dynamic, yes, there is that. But from a student's perspective, you can understand why the AI seems more approachable, easier, to ask questions rather than going to, a lecture, which they may feel perhaps a bit intimidated, feel like they're, that they don't know. and they're, they may not want to, well, it makes them feel vulnerable approaching sometimes. Not all students, some students feel very confident about approaching staff. So I suppose it goes back to, again, well, I suppose what this whole webinar is about, and the whole Student Minds kind of University Mental Health Day, is promoting connection. And, just trying to encourage that. And yet again, what a number of people have said about is, like, if you inform students, they can make that decision about, well, actually, it's important to approach academics because they are the ones that are, the specialists in this area. And it was something that came up in the survey as well. Students, the mentors had reported that students, it was easier to go and, to go and ask AI rather than approach their academics. And there is a concern in that because, if they keep doing that, it's creating a disconnect. So it is about, encouraging that connection and trying to make, I suppose, anybody in university settings, trying to make themselves as accessible for students, particularly new students, when they're, trying to get to grips with the transition into courses and university kind of environments and how they operate.
Thank you so much, all. I mean, just at this point, I just want to say a huge thank you to Ria, Tara, Paul, and Ollie for all your efforts prep for today. And it's been a fascinating conversation, and I would love to continue it further. But as we wrap up, I want to just give just one ask to you as we wrap up. I really hope that today has really shown you the important and accessible discussions that Student Minds are enabling in our sector. It's really important work, and we really want to continue to build on it. But to do so, we need your help. Please reach out to us if you're interested in working with us on this topic specifically. And you can use the QR code on the screen to make a donation to us. If everyone on this call, there was over 200 at one point, if everyone on this call actually donated £5 to us today, that will give us enough funds to run another event like this for all of you, but we can't do it without your support. So please don't forget to donate. And like Fran said at the start, we will email you after this with the link. And thank you to all of you that have joined us and shared those questions. Please keep the conversation going. We're going to be sharing the recording with you as well. And we will also share a feedback form because we'd really like to hear from you. Details on anything that we can do to keep improving the work we do. And if you didn't sign the tick box to say we could message you via LinkedIn, please sign up to our newsletter so that we can keep that relationship going with you all. But now I will just wrap up with just encouraging you to have a really heartwarming and thought-provoking rest of University Mental Health Day. And please get out there and go and connect with some other human beings. Thank you, and see you again soon.